guys, it's Miss Stacie. Welcome to summer reading program. This is preschool story time, and so I have some of my favorite books about libraries and animals because our theme this year is Tales and Tales. So I'm going to start off with Library Lion. This is a great book. You guys are going to love it. Okay, you ready? All right, let me scooch over a teensy bit here. Look at that. Library Lion. One day, a lion came to the library. He walked right past the circulation desk and up into the stacks. Mr. McBee ran down the hall to the head librarian's office. "Miss Merriweather," he called. "No running," said Miss Merriweather, without looking up. "But there's a lion in the library," said Mr. McBee. "Is he breaking any rules?" said Miss Merriweather. She was very particular about rule breaking. "Well, not really," said Mr. McBee. "Then leave him be." What are some of our library rules? The lion wandered all around the library. He sniffed the card catalog. He rubbed his head against the new book collection. Then he padded over to the story corner and went to sleep. No one was sure what to do. There weren't any rules about lions in the library. I guess we don't have any lion rules in our library either. Soon it was time for story hour, and there weren't really any rules about lions at story hour either. The story lady seemed a little nervous, but she read out the first book's title in a good, clear voice, and the lion looked up, and the story lady kept reading. The lion stayed for the next story and the story after that, and he waited for another story, but the children began to walk away. "Story hour's over," a little girl told him. "It's time to go." The lion looked at the children. He looked at the story lady. He looked at the closed books, and then he roared very loud. Roar! Miss Merriweather came striding out of her office. "Who is making that noise?" she demanded. "It's the lion," said Mr. McBee. Miss Merriweather marched over to the lion. "If you cannot be quiet, you will have to leave," she said in a stern voice. "Those are the rules." The lion kept roaring and he sounded sad. The little girl tugged on Miss Merriweather's dress. "If he promises to be quiet, can he come back for story hour tomorrow?" she asked. The lion stopped roaring and he looked at Miss Merriweather, and Miss Merriweather looked back. Then she said, "Yes, a nice quiet lion would certainly be allowed to come back for story hour tomorrow." "Hooray!" said the children. Oh boy, you think he's going to do it? Can he be quiet? The next day the lion came back. "You are early," said Miss Merriweather. "Story hour is not until 3:00. The lion did not budge. "Very well," said Miss Merriweather. "You might as well make yourself useful." She sent him off to dust the encyclopedias until it was time for story hour. Well, the next day, the lion came early again. This time, Miss Merriweather asked him to lick all the envelopes for the overdue notices. Soon the lion began doing things without being asked. He dusted the encyclopedias, he licked the envelopes, he let small children stand on his back to reach books on the highest shelves. Then he curled up in the story corner to wait for story hour to begin. At first, the people in the library were nervous about the lion, but soon they got used to having him around. In fact, he seemed very well suited for the library. His big feet were quiet on the library floor. He made a comfy backrest for the children at story hour, and he never roared in the library anymore. What a helpful lion, people said. They patted his soft head as he walked by. How did we ever get along without him? Mr. McBee scowled when he heard that. They had always gotten along fine before. No lions were needed. Lions, he thought, could not understand rules. They did not belong in the library. Oh, look at Mr. McBee. He is jealous. Lion is doing such a good job, isn't he? One day, after he had dusted all the encyclopedias and licked all the envelopes and helped all the small children, the lion padded down the hall to Miss Merriweather's office to see what else there was to do. There was still some time left before story hour. "Hello, Lion," said Mrs. Merriweather. "I know something you can do. You can bring a book back into the stacks for me. Just let me get it down from the shelf." Miss Merriweather stepped up onto the step stool. The book was just out of reach. Miss Merriweather stood on her toes. She stretched out her fingers. "Almost there," she said. Then Miss Merriweather stretched a little too far. "Ouch," said Miss Merriweather softly. She did not get up. "Mr. McBee," she called after a minute. "Mr. McBee." But Mr. McBee was at the circulation desk. He could not hear her calling. "Lion," said Miss Merriweather, "please go get Mr. McBee." The lion ran down the hall. "No running," Miss Merriweather called after him. The lion put his big front paws up on the circulation desk and looked at Mr. McBee. "Go away, Lion," said Mr. McBee. "I'm busy." The lion whined. He pointed his nose down the hall at Miss Merriweather's office. Mr. McBee ignored him. Finally, the lion did the only thing he could think of to do. He looked Mr. McBee right in the eye, then he opened his mouth very wide, and he roared the loudest roar he had ever roared in his life. Roar! Oh dear. He had promised not to roar in the library. Mr. McBee gasped. "You're not being quiet. You're breaking the rules." Mr. McBee walked down the hall as fast as he could. The lion did not follow him. He had broken the rules. He knew what that meant. He hung his head and walked toward the doors. Mr. McBee did not notice. "Miss Merriweather," he called as he walked. "Miss Merriweather, the lion broke the rules. The lion broke the rules." He burst into Miss Merriweather's office. She was not in her chair. "Miss Merriweather?" he asked. "Sometimes," said Miss Merriweather from the floor behind her desk, "there is a good reason to break the rules, even in the library. Now please go call a doctor. I think I've broken my arm." Mr. McBee ran to call the doctor. "No running," Miss Merriweather called after him. The next day, things were back to normal. Almost. Miss Merriweather's left arm was in a cast. The doctor had told her not to work too hard. "I will have my lion to help me," Miss Merriweather thought. But the lion did not come to the library that morning. At 3 o'clock, Miss Merriweather walked over to the story corner. The story lady was just beginning a story for the children. The lion was not there. People in the library kept looking up from their books and computer screens, hoping they would see a familiar furry face. But the lion did not come that day, or the next day, or the day after that. One evening, Mr. McBee stopped by Miss Merriweather's office on his way out. "Can I do anything for you before I go, Miss Merriweather?" he asked her. "No, thank you," said Miss Merriweather. She was looking out the window. Her voice was very quiet, even for the library. Mr. McBee frowned as he walked away. He thought there was probably something he could do for Miss Merriweather after all. Mr. McBee left the library, but he did not go home. He walked around the neighborhood. He looked under cars and behind bushes. He looked in backyards and trash cans and tree houses. What do we suppose he's looking for? Finally, he circled all the way back to the library. The lion was sitting outside looking through the glass doors. "Hello, Lion," said Mr. McBee. The lion did not turn around. I thought you might like to know, said Mr. McBee, that there's a new rule at the library. No roaring aloud, unless you have a very good reason. Say, if you're trying to help a friend who's hurt, for example. The lion's ears twitched, and he turned around. But Mr. McBee was already walking away. Oh, you think the lion will come back? The next day, Mr. McBee walked down the hall to Miss Merriweather's office. What is it, Mr. McBee? Asked Miss Merriweather in her new, sad, quiet voice. I thought you might like to know, said Mr. McBee, that there's a lion in the library. Miss Merriweather jumped up from her chair and ran down the hall. Mr. McBee smiled. No running, he called after her. Mrs. Merriweather didn't listen. Sometimes there was a good reason to break the rules, even in the library. Aww. Look at that. Did you guys like that story? I loved that story. All right, and one more. It's called A Library Book for Bear. Oh, I hope all of you are getting library books and enjoying them. Let's see what Bear does about his library books. This says, Bear had never been to the library. He had 7 very nice books at home, 3 about kings and queens, 3 about honeybees, and 1 about pickles. Bear was quite sure he had all the books he would ever need. Only 7? Gotta come to the library. There's hundreds. One morning, Bear heard a tap, tap, tapping on his door. When he opened the door, there was Mouse, small and gray and bright-eyed. We are off, said Mouse with a happy wag of his whiskers. Bear frowned. He had agreed to go with Mouse to the library, but now he was quite sure it was a dreadful mistake. Completely unnecessary, Bear announced. I have all the books I need right here. Really? Oh, there are many delightful books at the library, Mouse assured him. Bear grumbled, but he had promised. So he buckled up his red roller skates and stepped outside, grabbing a basket for the books. Oh, he is one snazzy roller skater. Bear skated and Mouse rode in the basket to the library, the wind rippling nicely through their fur. But when they got to the library, Bear did not like how big it looked. There are far too many books in there, he protested, most excessive. Oh no, it's quite exciting, Mouse said, leading Bear through the tall doors. In the library, there were more books than Bear ever thought there could be. He quickly found a tucked away corner, but even here, there were lots and lots of books. Terribly extravagant. Bear's voice was a little loud. I shall find you the perfect one, Mouse said quietly in his library voice. One about pickles, commanded Bear. After all, he only had one of those. But Mouse had whisked away. Oh, he's so angry. Mouse came back with a thick green book, and Bear opened it. Rocket ships? Ridiculous. Bear's voice was getting louder. A good book about pickles is all I require. Remember, quiet in the library, murmured Mouse as he scurried off. And he soon returned with a tall yellow book. I am not interested in wooden canoes. Bear's voice was even louder. Quiet voices in the library, Mouse reminded him. My voice is always quiet, Bear shouted. I will find my own book. I can assure you that pickles are quite interesting. Mouse didn't look so sure, but Bear quickly spotted a blue book with a pickle on the spine, and Mouse sprang up to the shelf to get it for him. Inside were pictures of pickles. The pickles had fairy wings. They were dancing with petunias. "No dancing pickles!" Bear roared. "Shh!" said a voice. Bear peeked around a bookshelf. There sat a librarian with a cluster of youngsters gathered around her. The librarian smiled, but a mother squirrel squished an angry finger against her lips. And an old raccoon said sternly, "Quiet in the library." Bear turned with a huffy sniff. "I know when I'm not wanted," he told Mouse. "I want to go home." "Surely at least one book," Mouse began, but Bear cut him off. "I have all the books I need." He looked quite certain. "Then we're off," said Mouse, but his whiskers didn't wag this time. Bear stood still. He was listening carefully to a voice on the other side of the bookshelf. So, the very brave bear began to inch his way towards the treasure chest, the voice said. "I'm ready," began Mouse. "Shh!" exclaimed Bear. "It's just getting to the good part." "Oh, but you said..." "Quiet voices in the library!" Bear bellowed. Look at him. This time, the librarian got up and looked around the bookshelf at Bear. Bear stood very still and very quiet, as if he had been still and quiet all along. "Would you like to join story time?" the librarian asked. Bear glanced at Mouse. "We'd love to have you," said the librarian. Bear and Mouse scooted around the shelf and found 2 empty chairs. The librarian began to read again. Bear lifted the lid to the treasure chest, and inside, the librarian paused, and Mouse and Bear strained forward. They can't wait to hear the end. "Inside," she said, "was a mound of pickle slices, and each shining slice was made of diamonds and gold, and everyone shouted, 'Hooray for the very brave bear!' And then she said, 'The end.'" Bear stared dreamily into space for a moment, then he looked over at Mouse and announced, "As I said, pickles are most interesting." "Indeed," said Mouse. Later, Mouse rode in the basket with 7 new books. There were 2 about wooden canoes, 2 about rocket ships, 2 about teapots, and 1 called The Very Brave Bear and the Treasure of Pickle Island, which Bear read to Mouse that very same day. Did you love that one? I love that one a lot. All right, let's do our closing. You ready? Tickle the stars, tickle your toes, turn around and tickle your nose. Reach way down low, reach way up high. Story time's over, so wave bye-bye. I'll see you next week.